I married a broke guy. Then he asked about my job. Too specific. How do you know that? He smiled. I walked into a meeting and he was in charge. I didn't think much of it at first. People ask questions. That's normal. But Ryan didn't ask like he was curious. He asked like he already knew the answer and just wanted to hear me confirm it. We met at a coffee shop in Tulsa. I was already irritated before he even spoke to me. Work had been a mess for weeks. Systems going down, clients getting louder, and somehow every problem still ended up on my desk even when it wasn't supposed to. I snapped at the barista for getting my order wrong, then apologized right after. Ryan looked over and said, "Bad day." I laughed, but it came out rough. Bad job. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't give advice. He just listened. That was the first thing that made me stay at that table longer than I planned. I told him about work. Not everything, just enough. I said I worked as an executive assistant at Northline Systems. I said it was chaotic, underpaid, and full of decisions that didn't make sense. I said management always blamed the people actually doing the work. He asked, "Did they cut your department budget after the last review or before?" I paused. After. Why? He nodded slightly. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. It didn't sound like a guess. It sounded like confirmation. I ignored it. We kept seeing each other after that. Coffee turned into dinners, dinners turned into weekends, and it felt easy in a way I wasn't used to. He said he worked freelance as a civil engineer. Contract work, consulting, nothing stable. I didn't care. After dealing with men who cared too much about status, he felt calm. I liked that I was the stable one. I liked that he needed me more than I needed him. Looking back, that part matters more than I want to admit. I talked a lot. Mostly about work. My manager, Angela Bennett, who could turn any small mistake into a lecture. My coworker Nicole Ross, who somehow knew everything about everyone. Brian Nelson, the executive who showed up just enough to repeat whatever came from higher up. Ryan listened. Always. But sometimes he asked questions that felt just a little off. Did Angela approve that change, or did it come from above? From above, I said. At least that's what she claims. And Brian didn't push back? I frowned. Brian doesn't push back on anything. He gave a small nod like that confirmed something. One night I joked, "What, do you secretly work there or something?" He smiled. Something like that. I thought he was joking. I really did. We moved in together after a few months. It wasn't planned. His stuff just slowly stayed longer until it didn't leave. It felt normal. Easy. Living together made everything feel more stable. He was quiet, consistent, never dramatic. If anything, I was the one bringing the chaos home. Work kept getting worse. I was doing more than my actual role. Scheduling, internal coordination, client follow-ups, sometimes even handling things that should have gone through management. Everyone relied on me, but nothing changed on paper. No promotion. No raise. I told Ryan one night, "I'm already doing the job above me. They just don't want to pay me for it." He didn't hesitate. "Then they won't promote you." I looked at him. "Why not?" "Because you're solving their problem for free." I went quiet. That's exactly what Angela said. Not like that, but same idea. He shrugged. It's a common pattern. Again, it didn't feel like a guess. I tried to ignore it. I applied for the promotion anyway. Everyone said I'd get it. Even Jason Carter, who barely talked, told me, "If they don't give it to you, that's just stupid." I believed him. I shouldn't have. Angela called me into a meeting and sat across from me with that careful tone she used when she thought she was being professional. "You're doing excellent work where you are," she said. "We don't want to disrupt that." I stared at her. "So I don't get promoted because I'm too good at the job I already have?" "It's more nuanced than that. It always is." I went home angry. Not loud angry. Quiet angry. The kind that sits in your chest and doesn't move. Ryan was on the couch when I walked in. "They didn't promote me," I said. He looked up. Not surprised. Not confused. Just calm. "What reason did they give you?" he asked. I laughed once. "That I'm too valuable where I am." He nodded slowly like he expected that exact answer. And something about that moment didn't feel right. Not enough to question everything. But enough that I noticed it. Enough that I remembered it. I asked him, half joking, "Have you seen this happen before or something?" He held my gaze for a second too long, then said, "Yeah." Not a joke this time. Just, yeah. That was the first moment something shifted. I didn't know what it meant yet. I just knew it didn't feel as simple as it used to. And I still didn't understand why every time I complained about work, it felt like he was already part of it. I tried to ignore that feeling. It didn't make sense, so I pushed it down and kept going. Life didn't change after that night. We still woke up together, still shared coffee in the morning, still moved around each other like everything was normal. But something small had shifted. Not loud. Just enough that I started paying attention. Work didn't slow down. If anything, it got worse. Without the promotion, nothing officially changed, but everything unofficially did. More responsibilities kept landing on me. More decisions got pushed down without explanation. I was still reporting to Angela, still sitting in the same chair, but doing more than half the work that should have belonged to someone above me. I started noticing patterns. Decisions that didn't make sense at first, then somehow worked out later. Policies that felt rushed, then quietly corrected weeks after. It was like someone was adjusting things behind the scenes after hearing complaints. One night, I told Ryan, they're cutting overtime again. But they still expect us to cover after-hours issues. He didn't react right away. Then he said, they'll reverse that in a few weeks. I looked at him. Why would they do that? Because it'll break something they didn't account for, he said. And then they'll fix it. It sounded too specific. They've done that before? I asked. He gave a small shrug. Companies do that. Companies. Not your company. Not places like that. Just companies. I didn't push it. I told myself he was just observant. Maybe he'd worked in environments like this before. Maybe I was just noticing it more because I was already frustrated. But then it kept happening. I complained about a scheduling system that didn't make sense. 2 weeks later, it changed. I vented about how clients were being prioritized wrong. A month later, the process was adjusted. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. Then it started feeling like timing. Then it started feeling like connection. I didn't say anything. Instead, I started testing it without meaning to. One night, I said, if they don't fix the reporting structure soon, we're going to lose clients. Ryan looked at me carefully. Why do you think that? Because everything is bottlenecked. It all goes through the same people. It's going to break. He nodded once. That's a fair point. Nothing else. 2 weeks later, the reporting structure changed. That's when it stopped feeling like coincidence. I remember sitting at my desk, staring at the update email, rereading it over and over. It wasn't exactly what I said, but it was close enough that it made my stomach tighten. I didn't say anything to anyone. Not to Nicole, who would have turned it into gossip in 5 minutes. Not to Jason, who would have just raised an eyebrow and moved on. I kept it to myself. At home, I started watching Ryan more. The way he listened. The way he didn't react emotionally to things that usually got a reaction out of people. The way he seemed to already understand the outcome of situations before they played out. One night, I asked, do you ever get tired of hearing about my job? He looked at me like the question didn't make sense. No. Why not? Because you're telling me what's actually happening, he said. Something about that answer stuck. Not your day. Not your feelings. What's actually happening? I didn't know why that bothered me. Work pushed harder. I pushed back more. I started speaking up in meetings. Challenging things I would have stayed quiet about before. Not aggressively, just enough to be noticed. Angela didn't like that. She pulled me aside after one meeting and said, you've been more vocal lately. I'm just pointing out issues, I said. She gave me that tight smile. Just be careful how you do that. I went home irritated again. I think she's starting to see me as a problem, I told Ryan. He shook his head slightly. She sees you as a variable. I frowned. What does that even mean? It means you're changing something she's used to controlling. That didn't sound like something a freelance civil engineer should say. That sounded like someone who understood internal dynamics at a level I didn't. I stared at him. You talk like you've been in those rooms. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, I've seen enough to recognize patterns. Patterns again. Everything was patterns with him. I let it go. Again. But I stopped talking as freely after that. Not completely. I still told him things. It was habit at that point. But I filtered more. I paid attention to what I said and how he reacted. And that's when I noticed something else. He never asked about anything personal at work. Only structural things. Decisions. Changes. Processes. Never gossip. Never emotions. Never who liked who. Just how things worked. That's when it started to feel less like listening. And more like collecting. I didn't like that thought. So I tried to prove myself wrong. I told him something small and wrong on purpose. Not a big lie, just a slight twist on a situation at work. I said a policy was being delayed when I knew it was actually moving forward. He didn't react much. Just nodded. A week later, the policy was still moving forward exactly as planned. No change. No adjustment. That should have made me feel better. Instead, it made things worse. Because it meant one of two things. Either I was imagining everything, or he only acted on things he already knew were real. I didn't sleep much that night. A few days later, I got an email. Mandatory attendance. Senior leadership alignment meeting. That alone was strange. People at my level didn't get invited to those. Then I saw the location. It wasn't our office. It was a different building. Downtown. One I'd seen before but never been inside. I walked into work the next day with that email sitting in my head like a weight. Nicole leaned over her desk. Did you get that meeting invite too? I nodded. Yeah. She lowered her voice. What do you think it is? No idea. Jason passed by and said quietly, if they're pulling people from operations, something's shifting. Shifting. Everything felt like it was already shifting. That night, I showed Ryan the email. Have you ever heard of this building? I asked. He glanced at it for half a second too long. Yeah, he said. How? He hesitated. Just from around, he said. That was the first time his answer didn't feel natural. It felt like he chose it. Carefully. I looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see someone safe. I saw someone who knew more than he was telling me. I didn't say anything, but something inside me locked into place. The next morning, I got dressed, drove downtown, and walked into that building with one thought sitting heavy in my chest. If this is nothing, I'm overthinking everything. If this isn't nothing, then I don't know who I married. I knew something was wrong the second I walked into that building. It didn't feel like Northline. Same company name on the glass doors. Same logo. But everything else was different. Quieter. Cleaner. Controlled. No rushed conversations, no clutter, no tension hanging in the air. It felt like the version of the company we were supposed to believe existed. The receptionist checked my name and told me to wait. I sat there with my phone in my hand, not even looking at it. Just holding it like something to anchor me. A few other people from different departments were there too. Nobody was talking much. Nicole walked in a few minutes later, eyes wide. This place is different. Yeah, I said. Jason showed up last. He looked around once and muttered, "This is where the real decisions happen." That didn't help. We were eventually called into a conference room. Glass walls. Long table. Too clean. Too quiet. Brian Nelson was already there, standing near the head of the table. He gave us that same polished expression he always wore, like everything was under control even when it wasn't. "This is just a quick alignment meeting," he said. "We're bringing in some operational voices." Operational voices. That was new. I sat down, trying to ignore the feeling in my chest that something wasn't lining up. Brian started talking about restructuring, about improving communication between departments, about streamlining decision pathways. The usual corporate language that sounded like movement without actually saying anything. I tried to focus. Then the door opened. I didn't turn right away. I don't know why. Maybe part of me already knew something was coming and didn't want to confirm it. But I heard the shift in the room. Chairs straightening. Brian stepping slightly to the side. So I looked. And Ryan walked in. Not in the hoodie. Not in the worn jeans. He was in a suit. Clean. Sharp. Like he belonged in that room in a way I never had. For a second, nothing made sense. I actually said it out loud. "What are you doing here?" The room went quiet. Ryan stopped when he saw me. Just for a second. Like he hadn't expected the moment to hit this way. Then he kept walking. Brian cleared his throat. "This is Ryan Campbell." That was it. No explanation. No title. Just his name, like that was enough. And the worst part was, it was. You could feel it in the room. The way people straightened. The way Brian shifted, just slightly, like he was no longer the one in control. Ryan stood at the head of the table. My head felt like it was underwater. Everything slow, distorted. "You didn't tell me you were coming," I said before I could stop myself. He looked at me. Not surprised. Not defensive. Just steady. "I was going to," he said. That was the same thing he said later. "I was going to tell you." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "This is complicated." Just that. Brian tried to move the meeting forward, but it didn't matter. I didn't hear half of what was said. Words blurred together. Metrics. Alignment. Strategy. All I could hear was every conversation we'd had at home. Every complaint. Every detail I shared. Every time he asked something too specific. It all snapped into place at once. I sat there, silent, while he spoke like this was normal. Like he'd always been there. Like I wasn't sitting across from him realizing I didn't actually know who he was. At some point, he said something about restructuring support teams based on direct feedback from operations. Direct feedback. My stomach dropped. The meeting ended faster than it felt. People stood, gathered their things, avoided eye contact with me like they sensed something was off, but didn't want to be part of it. Nicole gave me a look on her way out. Confused. Curious. Already thinking. Jason paused for a second, looked at Ryan, then at me, then walked out without saying anything. The door closed. And suddenly it was just us. I stayed in my chair. He didn't move closer. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. Then I asked how long. He didn't pretend not to understand. "Since before we met," he said. Something in my chest tightened hard enough that I had to look away. "So everything," I stopped, then forced it out. "Everything I told you." "I listened," he said. "That's not what I asked." He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Some of it helped." Helped. I laughed, but it didn't sound right. "Helped what?" "Your company." "Our company," he said automatically. I looked at him. "No. Don't do that." He went quiet. "You let me sit there every night and complain about decisions you were making," I said. "You let me think I was talking to someone who had nothing to do with it." "I wanted you to be honest," he said. "I was honest," I said. "Because I didn't know I was talking to the person in charge." He took a step closer. "If you knew, You would have filtered everything. Yeah, I said. Because that's what people do when there's a power imbalance. The word hung there. Power imbalance. He didn't argue with it. I wasn't trying to use you, he said. I shook my head. You don't get to decide that. Silence again. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my head since the moment he walked in. Did anything I say change anything? He looked at me. And for a second, I thought he might lie. He didn't. Sometimes, he said. That was worse than I expected. Because it meant I wasn't imagining it. Every change. Every adjustment. Every moment I thought something felt familiar. It wasn't coincidence. It was him. And I didn't even know I was part of it. I stood up slowly. My legs felt unsteady, like I hadn't caught up to what was happening. You should have told me, I said. I was going to, he repeated. When? I asked. After I told you everything? After you got what you needed? His expression didn't change much, but something behind it shifted. That's not fair, he said. I let out a breath. Neither is this. I walked past him without waiting for a response. Out of the room. Down the hallway. Through the glass doors. Back into a version of the world that suddenly didn't feel real anymore. Because the person I went home to every night was the same person making the decisions I spent years complaining about. And I didn't know which part of that was worse. I didn't quit. That's the part people expect me to say. That I walked out, sent an email, burned the bridge, chose my self-respect. I didn't. I went home. Ryan was already there when I walked in. Same apartment. Same couch. Same place everything had always been. It felt wrong seeing him there, like two versions of him were overlapping and I couldn't separate them anymore. He looked up. You left before we could finish talking. There wasn't anything left to finish, I said. That's not true. I dropped my bag on the table harder than I meant to. You hid something this big from me for our entire relationship. What exactly do you think we're finishing? He stood up, slower this time, like he was trying not to escalate it. I didn't hide it to manipulate you. You didn't hide it at all? I shot back. You just forgot to mention you own the company I work for? He didn't answer that directly. I wanted one person in my life who didn't see me as that, he said. As the owner. As the decision maker. And I wanted to know who I was married to, I said. That shut him up for a second. I sat down across from him, suddenly exhausted. You let me complain about things you controlled. I didn't control everything, he said. Enough, I said. Enough that my words mattered. He didn't deny it. That's the part you don't get, I said. I didn't choose to have that kind of influence. I didn't even know I had it. He rubbed his hand over his face. If you knew, you would have held back. Of course I would have, I said. Because that's what people do when there's a power imbalance. There it was again. Power. Neither of us said anything for a few seconds. Then he said, quieter, you weren't wrong about anything you said. I laughed once. That doesn't make this better. No, he said. But it means I listened for a reason. That line stayed with me longer than I wanted it to. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I still went to work. Walking into the office felt different. Not because anything had changed, but because now I knew where everything actually came from. Angela was already at her desk. She looked up when I walked in. You left the meeting early yesterday. I wasn't feeling well, I said. She studied me for a second, then nodded. We'll catch you up. Same tone. Same control. Nothing about her changed. That was the strange part. The system looked exactly the same from the inside. Same emails. Same expectations. Same pressure. But now I could see the layers. I sat at my desk and opened my inbox. Updates from leadership. Changes to processes. Adjustments to team structure. I read them differently now. Not as random decisions. As choices. His choices. Nicole leaned over. So, what was that meeting actually about? I kept my voice even. Restructuring. Nothing crazy. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. Jason passed by later and paused for half a second. You okay? Yeah, I said. He nodded once and kept walking. No one knew. That was the other part of this. No one knew I was married to him. And I was told, clearly, that it had to stay that way. Conflict of interest. Company policy. Legal complications. So I stayed. Same role. Same desk. Same manager. Except now, every time something happened, I knew exactly where it started. At home, things didn't go back to normal. We didn't fight loudly. It wasn't that kind of relationship. It was worse. Quiet conversations. Careful words. Long pauses. You think I used to, Ryan said one night. I think you let me be useful without telling me what I was useful for, I said. That's not the same thing. It feels the same, I said. He didn't argue. Days turned into weeks. And something shifted in me. If I was already part of the system without choosing to be, then maybe I could choose how to be part of it now. I stopped venting. I started pushing. In meetings, I spoke up more. Not emotional. Not reactive. Just clear. This process doesn't work. This is going to fail. We're ignoring something obvious here. Angela didn't like it. You've been more assertive, she said in one meeting. I'm doing my job, I said. She gave me that tight smile again. Just make sure you stay in your lane. My lane. I almost laughed. At home, I didn't ask Ryan if he heard what I said. I watched. That became my way of understanding. I'd point something out at work. A flaw. A gap. A bad decision. Then I'd wait. Sometimes nothing happened. Sometimes, a few weeks later, things shifted. Not exactly how I said it, but close enough. Close enough that it didn't feel random. I didn't know if he was listening, or if I just understood the system better now, or if both things were true. One night, I finally asked him, if I say something at work, do you hear it? He didn't answer right away. Then he said, not directly. That's not what I asked. He looked at me. I hear patterns. Patterns again. Always patterns. I nodded slowly. So I'm still talking to you. Not in the way you think, he said. I leaned back. That's the problem. I don't know what way it is. We didn't resolve it. I don't think we ever will. It's been 8 months. I'm still there. Same job title. Still no promotion. Angela got moved to a different department. Brian still shows up and repeats what comes down. The system feels smoother. Less chaotic. More controlled. And I don't know how much of that has anything to do with me. Or him. Or us. Sometimes I look at Ryan and still see the man I met in that coffee shop. Sometimes I look at him and see the person who built our entire relationship on something he chose not to tell me. He says he never lied. I say not telling the truth is still a kind of lie. We haven't agreed on that. I don't know if we will. The worst part is I don't even know what I want anymore. If I leave, I walk away from everything we built. If I stay in something that never feels completely honest. And I've thought about quitting. A lot. But part of me doesn't want to walk away from a place I understand now in a way I never did before. Even if no one knows why. Even if no one ever will. So now I'm here. Married to someone who technically runs the place I work in. Working in a system I might be influencing without meaning to. Living in something that doesn't feel clean, but doesn't feel entirely wrong either. And I don't know what that says about me. Or about us. I just know I haven't left. So, what would you do? I still don't know if I was used, or if I learned how to use the system back. Would you stay, knowing everything started with something this big being hidden from you, or walk away, even if part of your life is finally starting to make sense?